Our story opens with Daisy, a maid working for the Weatherwoods family. Every morning, she cleans the front entrance and waters the flower beds. But as she explains, this isn't even supposed to be her job. Watering the plants belongs to the gardener. The problem is, there are only 3 servants in this entire mansion, so they have to handle everything themselves. The reason is simple. The master's wallet is seriously tight. Daisy is clearly exhausted, wiping sweat from her face as she pushes through her chores. Meanwhile, 3 men are standing outside the front gate. One of them, Baron Fadergale, is annoyed that Daisy seems to be ignoring them. His companion asks if she can even hear them, but the Baron insists she can. Before they can press the matter, someone spots the head maid rushing their way. The head maid throws the gate open and confronts the Baron directly. She wants to know if he's come again and makes it clear what she's told him before: there will be no selling of this mansion. She tells him to go back. But the Baron calls her impudent and claims he didn't come for that today. He says he must meet the new Viscount Weatherwoods. The head maid apologizes and tells him the master is currently away. The Baron doesn't buy it. He points out this is the 3rd time she's used that excuse just this month. He's been watching the place, and the only people leaving the mansion are the 3 servants. He gestures toward the building, noting that the weather always seems strangely bad right there, and rumors are already spreading around town that this is a ghost mansion. He can't believe they're letting a once magnificent estate fall into such a shabby state. The head maid tries to stop him, but the Baron shoves right past her. He says he can't tolerate this anymore. If his dear friend, the previous Viscount, knew his mansion had fallen into such ruin, he'd be heartbroken. Looking around the hall, the Baron mutters that time really flies. It's already been 4 years since the old Viscount died in the Magic War, and the memories are clearly weighing on him. The head maid follows him inside and firmly tells him to leave. Instead, the Baron turns his attention to Daisy. He calls out to her, telling her not to just stand there like an idiot, and orders her to come over. She nervously steps forward. He asks how long it's been since the new Viscount left the mansion. 2 years? 3? Daisy simply tells him the Viscount never left. The Baron pauses, thinking to himself that she's speaking rather bluntly. He asks if the Viscount is in such poor health that he can't even come outside. Daisy looks at him directly and says no. He's healthy. The Baron doesn't give up. He launches into a dramatic story, claiming the former master entrusted the new Viscount Weatherwoods to him, his closest friend. He even wipes away tears, saying he only wants to fulfill his responsibility. He asks Daisy one more time if she's sure nothing has happened to the Viscount. Daisy simply says yeah. Nothing. The Baron's face twists with rage. He shouts that a mere maid is being insolent, and he lunges at her. But in the next moment, he's on the ground. His men don't fare any better. Daisy stands over them and says she's holding back. The head maid rushes in, calling out Miss Daisy's name. She scolds Daisy, reminding her that maids must always endure things. She says even without using strength, they could have dealt with sickly raccoons like them. One of the Baron's men pulls himself up and charges at Daisy, saying she seems to know how to fight. She drops him instantly. The head maid turns to Daisy and asks if she expects her to believe that was holding back. Daisy claims her right hand is just in the middle of a rebellious phase. The head maid tells her she'll discipline it later. Outside, Daisy grabs a shovel and asks if they should bury the men around there. The head maid tells her not to say something so horrifying, then casually suggests placing them in front of the mansion or cutting off their heads as an example. After a pause, she changes her mind and tells Daisy to just sit them down normally. Very normally. So Daisy drags the 3 unconscious men outside the mansion gates. Afterward, the head maid reassures her. Since it was technically self-defense, they should be able to wrap this up properly. She tells Daisy to trust in the Weatherwoods family. Daisy thinks to herself, what else could she do? She's a maid, and the other woman is the head maid. When your superior tells you to do something, you do it. That's what she believed. But the next scene cuts to a dark room. Daisy is sitting at a table across from 2 men. And she reveals the truth. They say another name for a maid is hardship, and in the end, she was sued by the Baron for assault and intimidation. The story flashes back to a few days ago. Daisy Pago is being interviewed by a middle-aged woman wearing glasses and holding a red feather quill. The woman calls candidate number 38 to come in. When Daisy enters the room, she remarks on her beauty before asking for her name. Daisy introduces herself as Daisy Pago. The interviewer is immediately taken aback by her surname, noting that it is the same as Andert Pago, the hero of the Magic War. Daisy quickly brushes it off, saying it is a common name. The interviewer continues with the formalities, noting that Daisy's family consists of one younger brother, and her height of 170 centimeters is quite tall for a woman. She tells Daisy that this will be an advantage for the job she applied for. When asked why she wants to become a maid, Daisy gives a blunt and straightforward answer: money. The interviewer nods at the response, then asks what kind of employer she is looking for. Daisy's reply is unexpectedly dark. She says she wants a mansion so harsh and dreadful that two people could be working together and not even notice if one died. She wants a cruel employer who squeezes every last drop out of their workers. The interviewer looks completely confused. But Daisy adds that it sounds just right for her purposes. The interviewer suddenly gets excited, telling Daisy she is very lucky. She explains that she has secured a position at a mansion located in the bustling district, one of the most prestigious noble families in the empire. She hands Daisy the address. However, the interviewer has one final request. She asks Daisy to last at least 1 week before quitting, just so she can get her referral fee. Daisy arrives at the Weatherwoods estate. Looking at the massive, overgrown iron gates, she thinks to herself that it looks like a demon might come out of it, and even the bell seems to be broken. Unsure of what to do, she decides to wait. After an hour passes, she grows impatient and grabs the metal bars, shaking them vigorously. She figures that if she makes enough noise, someone will eventually come out. Her plan works. The head maid finally appears and opens the gate, apologizing for the delay. She confirms Daisy's identity and introduces herself as the head maid of the Weatherwoods estate. She tells Daisy that normally maids are not allowed to use the front gate or entrance, but in this estate, she can use them however she likes, though she asks her not to shake it like that. She then asks if Daisy has any luggage. Daisy mutters a quiet, The head maid promptly corrects her, reminding her that a proper reply should be, "No, I don't." Daisy corrects herself. The head maid provides the rules of the estate. The owner is Viscount Weatherwoods. The current staff consists of Daisy, the head maid, and a cook and gardener who will arrive in 4 days. The salary is paid on the 1st of every month, and the working hours are from 6 in the morning to 7 in the evening. She escorts Daisy to her room, which is surprisingly large for a maid's quarters. She tells Daisy to rest for a bit, change her clothes, and come to the first floor entrance. Before she leaves, the head maid gives one strict final warning. She tells Daisy that there is one thing she must remember. She must never enter the master's bedroom. And if anyone asks where he is, she is to say he is out. Daisy remains silent, and the head maid demands an answer. Daisy complies with a simple yes. Once inside her room, Daisy shuts the door and collapses onto the bed. She finds the place livable enough for her goal, which is to work here without drawing attention. Her thoughts reveal her true motive. Within the next 3 years, she must find those items, otherwise she will die. The next day, Daisy and the head maid are working nonstop. Daisy is already feeling exhausted, thinking to herself that she is seriously going to die and that this place is insane. The head maid compliments her, saying that things go much faster with 2 people and that Daisy is strong and quick-witted. She admits that it was worth giving a large sum to the registry office clerk to bring Daisy here. Daisy realizes that the clerk was only looking for a payout. As night falls, the head maid notices how late it is and suggests they stop for dinner. Daisy perks up at the mere mention of food. During the meal, Daisy practically inhales her soup and finishes 2 bowls. The head maid watches her with mild exasperation and tells her to keep those thoughts to herself since she is not the cook. The head maid remarks that she has seen countless maids pass through the Weatherwoods household, but she has never seen anyone quite like Daisy. Curious, the head maid asks Daisy how she ended up becoming a maid. Daisy pauses and reflects on the question herself. A flashback flashes before her eyes, a city engulfed in flames, and a blond man in a military uniform falling to the ground, surrounded by blood splatter. Daisy remains silent, holding her spoon, unable to give an answer. Noticing Daisy's silence, the head maid places a hand on her shoulder and tells her she doesn't have to answer if it's hard. She adds that everyone has their own story and carries at least one sad story in their heart. Daisy thinks to herself that she was about to say it was because she's homeless and broke, but quickly decides against it. She fears that if she reveals she's broke, they might treat her even more like a slave. However, contrary to her worries about being mistreated, the next day brings a back-breaking schedule. Daisy is tasked with cleaning the dust from the second-floor ceiling, followed by an endless list of other duties. The days begin to blur together. After dinner, she closes her eyes for just a moment, and when she opens them, it is already the next day, or rather, the day after that. The exhaustion is so severe that she imagines herself as a cow forced to carry the weight of her chores, with heavy stones labeled cleaning the first floor, wiping the second floor, and organizing the basement strapped to her back. After 3 days of such exhausting work, Daisy falls into a deep sleep. But in the dead of night, an intruder makes his move. A figure dressed in a black hooded cloak silently enters her room and stands over her bed, gripping a knife. Without any hesitation, the stranger brings the blade down toward her sleeping form. He stopped the blade just inches from her face. He told her to wake up and warned her that she had to obey him if she wanted to live. He then made his purpose clear. From today, she was a spy. Her job was to monitor Viscount Weatherwood's movements and report back regularly. Daisy, still half asleep, simply asked why. The intruder paused, clearly confused, and muttered to himself, wondering if she was still half asleep. He tried again, telling her to listen, but before he could finish, Daisy suddenly slapped his hand away. The knife went flying. She asked him if the pill was around here. The intruder started coughing. Daisy had already slipped something into his mouth. It was a suicide pill, a favored tool of the assassination guilds. She knew exactly what she was doing. The intruder, now gagging, managed to choke out a single word. Why? Daisy stood there and asked him again why. She wanted to know why he was targeting the Viscount. The intruder backed away, clearly terrified. He told her she was no ordinary maid and asked who she really was. He then started explaining himself, saying he was just fulfilling a request sent to the guild. He claimed he wasn't told why the Viscount had to be monitored. He didn't even know who the client was. Daisy pressed him, asking what number he was. He hesitated, then admitted he was at least the third. Daisy realized that the work was hard, but not enough for everyone to run away. She then asked what happened to the previous maids. The intruder told her he didn't know, his role was only to extract an oath of obedience from them. He insisted he didn't involve himself in anything beyond that. He explained that the person who sent the previous maids must have used magic to force the oath on them. An oath is a forbidden spell that uses one's own soul as collateral. If it's broken, the soul is destroyed. In other words, those previous maids might already be dead. Daisy asked what could drive someone to find out from the Viscount so badly. The intruder was begging at this point, asking her to spare him. He said he'd take his own life if he had to, but promised he'd be a fugitive forever. He even offered to take an oath of obedience to her, promising not to say a word about her to anyone. Daisy just turned around and told him she didn't need it. She quietly asked herself if she should kill him. But the next moment, the head maid's voice cut in from behind. She scolded Daisy, telling her not to say such horrible things. Daisy immediately stopped and simply said, "Yeah." The next morning, Daisy stood by the window, looking out at the estate. She let out a small sigh, muttering him to herself. She seemed to be thinking about everything that had happened. Inside the mansion, the head maid was busy pouring tea while Daisy looked out the window. Suddenly, Daisy noticed something. It was quite noisy outside. She pointed out that it looked like someone was moving in. The head maid agreed, mentioning how fast it happened after the Esla family packed up. Daisy froze at that. She turned to the head maid and asked, "What? It wasn't an empty house?" The head maid didn't answer. Later, Daisy got up to leave the room. The head maid asked where she was going. Daisy bluntly replied, "To pee." The head maid told her to use more refined language. Daisy admitted to herself that she was careless. As she walked down the hallway, she glanced out the window. She saw a man with bright blue hair walking toward the mansion. Daisy froze. She immediately recognized him. It was the same guy from last night. She couldn't believe it. She asked herself why he was acting like that. She stared at him from the window, and in that moment, the blue-haired man looked directly up at her. Daisy panicked. Did he actually sense her gaze from this distance? She told herself that this guy was no ordinary person. But then she shrugged it off. It couldn't be helped. She would just give up on the assassin guy and completely forget about everything that happened yesterday. The next morning, Daisy headed outside to start her chores. But when she reached the front entrance, she was met by a man in a formal suit. The blue-haired man greeted her with a warm smile. He introduced himself. He was the gardener and cook who would be starting today. That was the first meeting between Lou and Daisy. After their first meeting, Daisy wasted no time voicing her suspicions to the head maid. She told her directly that Lou needed to be fired. The head maid paused, asking who she was talking about. Daisy clarified she meant Mr. Lou. The head maid pointed out that he was certainly not an ordinary man in many ways, but Daisy argued that was exactly why he was dangerous. She insisted they fire him. The head maid told her it wasn't good to judge people so hastily. She then reminded Daisy that she was just as unique as Mr. Lou and told her to take her own advice. Daisy thought to herself that no matter how she looked at it, he was blatantly, insanely suspicious. But she couldn't deny one thing: he was incredibly beautiful. Even his bizarre blue hair looked dazzling, thanks to his perfectly harmonious features. Just looking at him felt like a mental assault. Lou introduced himself again, asking how he should address her. The head maid told him she could just call her the head maid. She then struggled to find the right words, telling him he was the chef and gardener. Lou nodded politely, saying he understood. But then he made a very strange comment. He told them it must be hard to believe that someone as blindingly beautiful as him would be working as a chef at a dying manor, or managing a garden that looked like a trash heap. He said they had to accept it, because it was the truth. The head maid was visibly flustered, but Daisy just stared at him with a flat expression. Lou then turned to Daisy and asked for her name. She simply replied, Maid. He paused, asking if her name was actually Maid, and said that was unique. He told her he looked forward to working with her, before deliberately calling her Miss Maid the maid. Later, as the two maids stood together, Daisy thought to herself that the only thing suspicious about Lou was his handsome face. She felt the head maid was far too naive. She recalled that the assassin she caught at dawn was already by Lou's side the night before. And on top of that, Lou lived right across the street from the Weatherwoods manor. She was convinced he was clearly a spy sent to monitor Viscount Weatherwoods. Just then, the head maid turned to her and called her name. Daisy flinched. The head maid pointed at the window and told her to wipe the handprints off the glass until they were spotless. Daisy was annoyed, but she had no choice. As she started scrubbing the window, Daisy ran through her options in her head. No matter how much she thought about it, both Lou and the assassin seemed to be cooperating. But she couldn't tell the head maid about any of this. If she did, the head maid would ask how she knew, and Daisy would look suspicious too. Then she might end up getting kicked out of even a weird house like this. Besides, the head maid was already a true slave to capital. She had completely fallen for Lou, who had offered to work for half pay and renovate the garden with his own money. Daisy realized that money was a dangerous thing. It had made the head maid turn a blind eye to a spy who threatened the master's daily life. Daisy thought that at times like this, she should just have a physical talk with Lou to make him spill his guts. She went outside to confront him directly. Lou was kneeling in the garden, and without looking up, he asked if she had something to say. Daisy asked him who he was. Lou stood up and casually reminded her that he'd already told her his name was Lou. He then called her Miss Maid the maid again. Daisy corrected him. She said she wasn't asking for his name. She was asking who he really was. Lou smirked. He asked if that meant she wanted to get to know him on a deeper level. Daisy's eye twitched with irritation. She told him they weren't at that stage yet and demanded that he stop playing coy. She wanted to know why he came here. Lou leaned in close, getting right in her face. Daisy didn't back down. He smiled and told her it was simple, he was a fan of hers. Daisy's face instantly cringed in disgust. Lou then added that he found some pervert tied up in his house last night. He said he was quite impressed by the way she boldly locked up a complete stranger. Daisy asked if he was saying that was the reason he entered the manor. Lu laughed and said, "Of course not." He immediately cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted for the head maid. He accused Daisy of slacking off and hitting on him. Daisy was furious. She thought to herself that he wasn't just suspicious, he was despicable. And how petty of him to bring up the head maid like that. The head maid came out and called Daisy's name. She said she heard someone mention slacking off. She added that hard work makes dinner taste better. Daisy just stood there in silence. That night, she worked her tail off, but when she finally sat down for dinner, the food still tasted like garbage. Cutting back to the present, we see Daisy and the head maid sitting together in a dark room. Daisy is wondering what happened with the lawsuit. She gives the conclusion first. The Baron dropped the charges. The head maid tells Daisy to forget about her background check. It's out of their hands now. Daisy mutters that there are more than a few things weighing on her mind, but the biggest problem is still Lulu, wearing a straw hat, approached her in the garden. He asked a very blunt question. "Did you kill the Baron?" Daisy countered, asking if he buried him. Lu shook his head. He told Daisy she must not say such things in public. Then he brought up the proper way to handle a life debt. He acted out a dramatic speech, saying that in times like these, a person should say, "You helped me, sir. I shall carve this day into my very bones and never forget it until the day I die. As a token of my gratitude, I shall become your slave. Please, master, let me lick your feet." He then asked Daisy if she wanted to try it. He leaned in and grabbed her shoulders. Before she could react, he pulled back. He grinned and told her that this guy already took care of it. Meanwhile, in another part of town, two men in suits were watching Daisy and Lu walk away. One of them asked the other if he was really going to just let her go like that. The other man crossed his arms and said yeah. He explained that they received orders from the higher-ups to investigate Daisy Pago's background, regardless of the incident with the Baron. The first man asked what they could do, since the Baron dropped the charges. He pointed out that they couldn't investigate further, even if they wanted to. He added that the Baron making all that fuss about it was strange too, and wondered if there was something more to this. The second man looked down, his expression darkening as he revealed a crucial detail. That Maid was one of the few survivors of Queen Island. Back at the manor, Daisy and Lu were sitting together on the steps outside. Daisy had her chin resting on her hand, looking bored. Lu was holding a basket of potatoes. He called out her name, saying he believed he had yet to receive a proper thank you. Daisy glanced at him with a blank expression, clearly not interested. Lu pressed on, asking if she was truly worse than a dog, since even dogs are known to repay kindness. Daisy just stared at him with an annoyed look, her eye twitching. Finally, she gave in. She muttered a quiet, "Thank you." Lu smiled and repeated the word back to her, asking if that was really a thank you. He then told her that if she was truly thankful, she should pay the price. Daisy immediately shut him down. She told him she didn't have any money. Lu walked closer and stood right in front of her, then told her it wasn't about money. He said that from now on, she shouldn't do such ignorant things. He told her to always use her head first. And if she ever found herself in a situation where she had to dispose of a body, she should notify him first. Daisy's face twisted with anger. A cross-shaped vein popped on her forehead. She asked him why on earth she should do that. Lu just smiled and told her it was simple, right? Just then, the head maid came running out, looking flustered. She called out to both of them, asking if they were all right. She said she didn't expect the Baron to file a lawsuit so quickly. Lu and Daisy both turned to her calmly. Daisy said she considered it self-defense. The head maid explained that she was planning to settle it through the family's influence, but the other side was just too persistent. Daisy and Lu exchanged a look. The head maid then noticed the time and mentioned that it was getting late. She asked Lu if he could prepare dinner for them. Lu smiled and said that if the head maid was asking, then of course. He chuckled and said he'd show off his skills a bit since this was a special occasion. The head maid clasped her hands together with a happy expression, saying she couldn't wait to see what he was capable of. Meanwhile, Daisy stood there clutching the potato basket. A dark, angry aura surrounded her. She glared at Lu and called him a fox-like bastard in her head. She thought to herself that at this rate, the head maid was going to fall for his charms all over again. She gritted her teeth and silently swore that she was the only one who could stay sharp. Soon after, Lou was in the kitchen, quickly peeling potatoes with impressive speed. He tasted the stew, then casually tossed a bit of seasoning in, looking completely at ease. He set a bowl of potato stew down on the table and told them to eat. He explained that the only ingredient he brought that could be called food was potatoes, so he kept it simple. The head maid took a bite and immediately looked amazed. She told him this was easily the best meal she'd had in years. She said she felt guilty for hiring him at half pay. Lou smirked and replied that if only someone hadn't been peeling the potatoes as slow as a turtle, he could have served it sooner. In a chibi cut-in, Daisy was shown sweating with a potato in her hand, looking completely stressed. Daisy started eating quickly. Lou told her to eat slowly. No one was going to take it from her. Daisy paused, then asked him a direct question. She wanted to know how he got the Baron to drop the charges. Lou gave her a blank stare. Daisy clarified that she was asking if he grilled him, boiled him, or what. She asked why the Baron dropped the charges. Lou rested his chin on his hand with a smile. He asked her if she thought he might be a noble higher than a Baron. Daisy just stared at him. He continued, saying he was curious why she would assume that. Then he went on a long, boastful monologue, describing himself as elegant, refined, wealthy, kind, intelligent, and highly self-aware. A chibi Daisy stood next to him with a flat, disgusted expression, holding up a sign that read, "Top-tier self-objectification." But then Lou changed the subject. He noted that he didn't know she could speak in such long sentences. He told her to keep chattering away like that from now on, instead of cutting her words off like a simpleton. Daisy's eye twitched with irritation. She thought to herself that she supposed she could look like a simpleton to him. But she then silently wondered if he didn't realize how much she loathed the fact that he was the one making her talk more. Just then, Lou slid his own bowl of stew toward her. He asked if that look meant she wanted his stew as well. Daisy's eye twitched again. She grabbed the bowl and thought to herself that fine, the stew was innocent. Lou then stood up and said that since he'd lost his stew to her, he should probably be heading out. He added that he would charge her for the overtime later. The head maid smiled and told him, "Okay, see you tomorrow." With that, Lou turned and walked out the door. After he left, Daisy sat there, her face slightly flushed with frustration. She thought to herself that the stew was delicious, but it was still bothering her. She stared down at the empty bowl and admitted that working with someone this suspicious didn't sit right with her. She walked through the dark, empty hallway with a lit candle in her hand, her expression serious. She told herself that so far, she had two hypotheses regarding his identity. Hypothesis 1. He snuck in to monitor Viscount Weatherwoods, just like the assassin. Hypothesis 2. Like the investigator said about the higher-ups being interested in her identity, he knew about her past and followed her here. She stopped by a window and looked out at the massive mansion grounds. She asked herself out loud, what were the chances of it being the latter? That night, Daisy tossed and turned in her sleep, her face twisted in distress. A flashback hit her like a wave, fragments of a battlefield filled with shattered glass and the echo of her own desperate voice crying out a name, Anders. Anders. In the memory, a man in a military uniform was shouting at her to stop this instant, telling her it was a direct order from the commander-in-chief. But Daisy back then, still in her past form, didn't listen. She told him she didn't need permission. She was acting on her own. The scene shifted. A white-haired man in uniform looked down at someone on the ground, saying, "Farewell, Raffaello." A figure in a dark cloak fell back, and the white-haired man ordered, "Return at once, Anders Pager." A massive shockwave erupted, and then the memory shattered like glass. Daisy woke up with a gasp, clutching her chest. She let out a heavy sigh, sitting on the edge of her bed. She wondered to herself if Lou knew. Then the narration laid out her past in full. 14 years ago, in the war waged by the Archmage Mephisto to obtain the power of immortality, Daisy had been the Emperor's sword, the one who protected the fate of humanity. Her other name was Anders Pager. And yes, the gender was different. She explained that after her younger brother died defending their home, Queen Island, she used ancient magic to change her body into a man's. She lived under her brother's name for years. She managed to kill Mephisto and fulfill her destiny. But she woke up back in her original body. And as luck would have it, 4 years had already passed. She was left with only 3 years to live. Daisy rubbed her face, frustrated. She told herself this wouldn't do. It was interfering with her sleep. If she got fired because she was late from sleep deprivation, it would be her loss. She realized she had no choice but to ask Lou directly. She got up, threw on a robe, and headed outside. She walked past the manor gates and stood in front of the mansion across the street. She thought to herself that getting over the wall wasn't the issue. But should she knock, or just break it down? Just then, the front door swung open. The silver-haired assassin from earlier stepped out, adjusting his bow tie. He looked at her with a smirk and said, "Quite a surprise, isn't it, Maid?" He told her that his master said she would be coming around this time, so he had been waiting for her. Daisy stared at him with a deadpan look, then asked, "Master?" A thought bubble popped up with a question mark as she wondered if he had become that guy's butler. The assassin confirmed it. The master told him to relay a message. Daisy asked what message. The assassin cleared his throat and delivered the message verbatim. "Tell Ms. Daisy when she arrives. Instead of wasting time on a foolish brand, why don't you practice peeling potatoes?" That's what he said. Daisy's face immediately flushed with anger. The assassin suddenly started sweating and panicking, shouting, "I didn't say it." Those are the master's words. But Daisy wasn't buying it. She narrowed her eyes and asked, "Are you two in league?" The assassin gave a cold, composed smile. He asked her, "In league? Have you forgotten that you were the one who locked me in here?" He then added, "Just as the master said, you must have some sort of amnesia." Daisy crossed her arms and told him she stayed here of her own free will. The assassin glanced at her outfit and said he found that hard to believe. Daisy shrugged and said she just yielded. The assassin leaned in, flashing a smug grin, and said it was only natural for the weak to yield to the strong. He then dropped a warning. He told her she may not know it, but the master was incredibly terrifying. Daisy's expression turned serious. She repeated the word terrifying, then asked if the mansion was under a concealment magic. She thought to herself that here, she could be free from the guild's surveillance. So for the time being, she planned to stay here and figure out her next move. She then considered the fact that there was high-level magic on the manor, magic that even she didn't notice. And not to mention, Lou was skilled enough to strike fear into a seasoned assassin. She silently admitted that her gut had been right back then. Since returning to this body, she hadn't picked up a sword once. If she had fought Lou right away, it might have been very dangerous. She looked at the assassin and asked, "Your master. What are the chances he's the client?" The assassin paused and said it was hard to say. The master didn't seem like the type to hire the assassination guild. But one thing was certain, the master was interested in the Weatherwoods. Daisy thought about it. The fact that Lou knew she was coming proved that he had some ability to predict things. He didn't seem to be lying, and survival was his top priority right now. So he had no reason to lie to her. She held out her hand and proposed a deal. She suggested they share whatever information they find on each other. The assassin was hesitant, asking why he should agree. Daisy held up her fist with a red cross popping out and firmly told him, "Once a week at this time in this spot." The assassin sighed and shook her hand, agreeing to help each other out. But then he paused. He told her there was one thing he'd like to ask. Daisy raised an eyebrow. With a completely serious face, the assassin asked, "Do you have any tips for washing blankets?" Daisy just stared at him.
The next morning, Daisy was hanging laundry outside.
Her expression flat and tired. She reflected on her recent actions. She had watched Lou yesterday, but found no significant findings. She sighed, realizing she'd have to confront him directly. Just then, Daisy turned and walked up behind Lou, who was standing in the garden with his watering can. She called out to get his attention. When he looked back, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded note, and held it out to him. She said she had something for him, but before Lou could even take it, he raised his hand and shook his head. He told her he was sorry, but he had to decline. He added that he had received so many confessions that he was sick of them. Daisy's face immediately went blank. She had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. Lou, completely unbothered, continued, saying that since she went to the trouble, he would at least read it. Daisy just stood there, stunned. Lu took the note and opened it. It was a carefully written letter from Daisy herself, laying out her suspicions in bullet points. It read, I find your actions suspicious. If you were assigned to monitor me or investigate the Weatherwoods family, be honest. Depending on the situation, I'm willing to cooperate. It listed her reasons. He started working the same time as her. He was wealthy yet took a lowly gardener job. He worked for half pay, and he moved into the house across the street immediately after. The conclusion was simple. Lu's identity is highly suspicious. Lu looked up from the note. He smiled and asked, Monitor you. That's an incredible level of narcissism. Daisy's eyes widened in shock. She immediately had a flashback to Lu's earlier boasts about being blindingly beautiful, elegant, refined, and wealthy. She was furious, wondering who was the one saying all that earlier, and how dare he talk to her about narcissism. A small chibi Daisy was seen sweating in frustration. She decided to just drop it for now, muttering that he hadn't even answered her note yet. Lu, however, wasn't done. He reached out and handed her a small terracotta pot filled with dirt. Daisy asked what it was. Lu told her he didn't care what kind of flower it was, but she had to make one bloom in it from the seed. He made it clear no transplanting allowed. She had to start from the seed. Daisy's eyes twitched. She asked why she should suddenly do that. Lu leaned in and told her that his identity was a very, very mind-blowingly great secret, so he couldn't just tell her for free. He offered a deal, make a flower bloom, and he'd tell her. He then gave her an alternative if she didn't like it. She could just pay him 500 gold instead. Daisy's eyes went wide with shock, and she mentally screamed that she wouldn't be able to save that much even if she worked as a maid for 100 years. Lu just smirked and said, I'll make it bloom. Keep your promise. Daisy was left completely speechless. Lu watched her with a knowing smile, saying he would look forward to it, and that he was curious to see what kind of flower she'd grow. Just then, the head maid appeared out of nowhere, adjusting her glasses. She asked them both if they wanted her to break their hands. She then gave a firm warning. Office romances were prohibited. Daisy immediately panicked, insisting it was a misunderstanding. The head maid calmly replied that whether it was a misunderstanding or not, they would see as time went on. She then turned to Daisy and told her to be careful if she was caught. She'd cut her pay. With a final order, she told Daisy to go buy some ingredients. Daisy, looking completely defeated with sweat drops on her face, meekly replied, Yes, ma'am. As Daisy walked through the market, she thought to herself that at this rate, she was the only one who would end up with a pay cut. She decided to stop investigating Lu for a while. After all, her suspicions were just gut feelings. He hadn't actually done anything suspicious yet. While buying ingredients, Daisy noticed an old woman sitting on the ground with a small stall. The vegetables looked sad and wilted. She thought to herself that they didn't look good, especially the old woman herself. Daisy approached and asked for 7 potatoes. The old woman looked up with a warm smile, grateful for a customer. Daisy took the potatoes, noting that since Lu was a good cook, it should be fine even if they've sprouted a little. But as she counted them, she noticed there was 1 extra potato in the basket. Just as she was about to turn and walk away, a group of thugs approached the old woman. One of them snatched the money right out of her hands. He told her they would be taking this as the merchant union fee she didn't pay last time. The old woman begged them, insisting she was just an old woman running a small stall, and she didn't want to join. The thug shoved her back, making her fall. He yelled at her, saying she was an old hag, and if she couldn't afford the fee, she should quit her business and get out of the district. Daisy had been watching the whole time from the side. Her expression turned cold and dark, a massive purple shadow falling over her face. She stepped forward, her voice low and sharp. She told them to stop right there, and asked if they all wanted to end up in the trash can. The thug turned around, angered, and asked who the hell she was. He sneered, saying that looking at her outfit, she was just a maid. He threatened her, asking if he wanted to make it so she couldn't even walk down the street anymore. The old woman, still on the ground, begged Daisy to run away. But Daisy didn't move. Without a word, Daisy delivered a swift, brutal kick straight between the thug's legs. The man gasped in agony as she followed up with a sharp blow to his face, sending him flipping through the air and landing head first inside a nearby trash can. The remaining thugs screamed in terror. Daisy calmly turned toward them and beckoned with a single finger. Panicked, the cronies scrambled over each other and fled for their lives. Turning back to the elderly woman, Daisy gently took her hands. "Thank you, dear. Thank you so much." The woman sobbed in relief. Daisy looked down at her with a gentle expression and asked, "Grandma, who are those guys?" The old woman explained. They started as a vigilante group during the Magic War, but after the war ended, they started demanding membership fees under the guise of keeping the market safe. If you didn't pay, they came by regularly and stirred up trouble. They made life absolutely miserable. Daisy listened quietly, staring at a sign in the background that read "Piece of Land." She stroked her chin, a thoughtful and dangerous smile forming on her face. She muttered to herself, "So that's how it is."
After the old woman explained the situation, Daisy watched the thugs run off, letting out a quiet She thought to herself that these guys seemed like real pieces of work. According to the nearby merchants who heard about the old woman, the group was ruthless. A nearby onion merchant explained that there were about 6 bosses, and they ran around the whole area collecting dues. A passing merchant added that this whole area was in the palm of their hands, and reporting to the police was useless. They were practically untouchable. Daisy reflected on the situation. She noted that it was a strange thing. To her, a pub had always been a place for people, a warm sanctuary where people comforted each other and shared information during the endless war with Mephisto. But now, these thugs were acting as thugs under the name of a merchant union. However, she didn't seem bothered. She realized that this actually worked out for her. She needed information on relics anyway, so she decided to put these guys to work. That night, Daisy snuck out of the manor. She knew that sneaking out at night was something a maid should not do, but she figured it was better than getting caught and scolded. She walked down the dark street in her casual clothes. Suddenly, she froze. She felt a chill in the air, and a small sweat drop appeared on her cheek as she nervously wondered if it was just her imagination, or if the air really had gotten chilly. She arrived at a quiet pub. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Looking around the dimly lit room, she noted that she didn't see 2 of the thugs from earlier. She walked up to the bar and started to place her order. But the bartender interrupted her, telling her they were not open for business. Before he could finish, another man stepped out from the back. He looked at Daisy and said, Wait. I think I know this customer." He walked closer, leaning over the bar, and asked if they had met somewhere before. Daisy tilted her head, thinking he did look oddly familiar. The man's face suddenly twisted into a wide, sinister grin. He asked why she wasn't answering. Then he identified her. "It is you. The crazy maid who smashed my brother's face in." Daisy's eyes widened. In her mind, she mentally connected the dots. Trash's brother? Or was he just a brother of Trash? Without warning, the bartender suddenly pulled out a pistol and aimed it directly at Daisy's face. He asked, "Is it her?" He looked at her and commented that she had a pretty face, and what a shame. He told her that unless she wanted a hole in her head, she should stay still. Daisy's eyes widened slightly at the barrel pointed at her. Then, with a completely calm and almost amused expression, she repeated his words back to him. "A hole?" Without missing a beat, Daisy grabbed the barrel of the pistol and yanked it sideways. In a flash, she slammed the metal down into the bartender's face, and the gun fired, straight through his own leg. The man screamed, clutching his thigh, blood spraying everywhere. Daisy looked down at him and casually asked, "Like this?" The first thug, the brother, was frozen in shock, letting out a bewildered, Daisy glanced at him and asked, "How's it looking like that?" The thug snapped out of it, furious, and shouted, "You bitch, how dare you!" He lunged at her, swinging a punch. Daisy sidestepped effortlessly, grabbed his arm, and flipped him clean over the bar. He crashed onto the floor with a heavy thud, groaning in pain. Daisy dusted her hands off, cracking her neck, and looked around the room. She calmly asked, "Now, who's next?" The 2 thugs were on the ground, groaning, barely able to move. But Daisy wasn't done. She looked at the fallen men and asked, "Lady, who the hell are you?" She turned her head slightly. She then pointed straight at a framed portrait hanging on the wall behind her, a group of military officers from the Magic War. In the photo, a young blonde soldier stood proudly in uniform. Daisy pointed at that figure and said, "That? I'm the reason for that." The thugs stared at her in complete confusion. Daisy stood up straight and looked down at them. She explained herself. She used to bust her ass trying to save the world. So, how did she feel seeing punks like them running wild after she finally saved it? She held up 3 fingers. She told them that she had something she needed to find within 3 years. To reach that goal, she needed to stay healthy first. But if they extorted protection money and cornered the merchants, they wouldn't be able to sell their goods, and the ingredients would rot. And if she ate that, she would get sick, and with her luck, she would die. She looked at them coldly and laid out her logic. In short, if you collect dues, I die. So, who wants to go first? The thugs were terrified. They screamed and begged her to wait. One of them, bleeding from the mouth, desperately shouted that they were from Buried Let. He warned her that if she killed them, she would become an enemy of Buried Let, and she wouldn't survive. Daisy tilted her head, her expression unimpressed. She thought to herself, Buried Let? Never heard of them. She then added, "That's what they say." But at that moment, a familiar voice cut through the air. The silver-haired assassin stepped out of the shadows, his arms crossed. Daisy asked him, "What's Buried Let?" He explained that it was an information guild that had grown rapidly since the Magic War. They operated across the 13 countries of the former Magic Union, including the Penloda Empire. He added that they were cruel bastards who would do anything to get information. They were so secretive that even their guild master's identity was a mystery. Daisy turned back to the thugs. She asked them why people would team up with such low lives. The bartender, clutching his wounded leg, frantically insisted that their union was under the protection of Buried Let. He pulled out a gold coin with a strange symbol on it, claiming it was the proof, and that Daisy was making a huge mistake. The assassin looked at the coin, studied it, and said, It doesn't seem like a lie." He told Daisy that information guilds were built on trust and money. Even if this was a pathetic branch, it was better not to touch them. But Daisy wasn't intimidated. She smiled slightly and said, "Actually, isn't this better?" She explained her new plan. A mole was more useful than a neighborhood thug, like someone she knew. She proposed a deal. She uses these thugs to take control of the town and avoid being tracked, and in return, she gets the information she wants. 2 birds, 1 stone. The assassin looked hesitant. He pointed out that it was still dangerous. They could report them secretly. Daisy just looked at him and asked, "What do you think we're going to use them for?" The assassin's eyes widened in realization. Daisy then turned to the 2 terrified thugs and gave them their final orders. "Now you know what to do, right?" The assassin stood beside her, smirking, and added, "Of course, Maid." The thugs screamed in terror, a massive "A" echoing through the pub. Finally, the assassin turned to Daisy and said, "By the way, I didn't know you could talk in such long sentences." Daisy glanced at him with a deadpan expression and replied, "I just didn't have a reason to." Back at the pub, the 2 thugs stood stiffly at attention, snapping a crisp military salute. Their legs were trembling, and their faces were covered in sweat. Daisy and the silver-haired assassin stood in front of them, watching calmly. Daisy spoke first. She declared that to celebrate their formation as the new merchant union, they would proceed with their first mission. The assassin turned to her, a couple of question marks floating above his head, and asked, "The object you said you were looking for earlier?" Daisy nodded. She clarified exactly what she was after. "Right. Diensect's eye." The assassin looked confused. He asked, "Diensect?" "The relic of the great healer said to be able to revive even the dead." Daisy crossed her arms and confirmed it. She then asked, "Rumor has it that it is hidden in Midwintry. Do you know anything about it?" The assassin shook his head and admitted he did not. However, he added that it was quite a strange coincidence. A few days ago, the master had asked about that object as well. Daisy's eyes widened. She froze, a visible shockwave radiating from her as she clutched her chest. Her mind screamed a single desperate question. Lou? Why? Later, Daisy was back at the manor, kneeling in the garden. Her hands were buried in the dirt of the small terracotta pot, working the soil. The narration filled in the gaps. According to the assassin, he had found a midwintry travel brochure in Lou's bedroom. The brochure mentioned a relic called Circle del Sol, excavated in midwintry, which had a high historical value, a healing relic possessed by the ancients, similar to the legendary Eye of Jansect. And a bookmark was placed on that exact page. Daisy continued to pat the soil with a flat, unbothered expression. She thought to herself that this led to one hypothesis, the reason that clearly wealthy guy had bothered to join as a chef and gardener. There might be information about Jensec's eye here at the Weatherwoods Manor. Just then, a voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Lou standing beside her, holding a thick leather-bound book. He told her he would leave it to her. Then he leaned in and said, "Miss Daisy, if you have been staring at someone's face for that long, shouldn't you at least leave a compliment?" Daisy's eye twitched. She silently cursed, thinking to scare he's quick. Lou asked her if she had planted the seed. Daisy nodded. Lou looked down at the pot and asked, "What is this natural and nonchalant non sequitur?" He flipped open his book to show her. The title read, "The Continent's 7 Mysteries for Children, Treasure Edition." Daisy's face went completely blank. She stared at him and asked, "Mystery Treasure Edition? Are there clues about the eye in that book?" The head maid suddenly appeared behind them, cutting in. She asked Lou, "Mr. Lou, did you do something wrong to Ms. Daisy?" Daisy's face was now shadowed in blue, her eye twitching with pure irritation. Lou looked completely innocent and replied, "I do not know." Perhaps the cone of silence got to her head. The head maid turned to Daisy with a warm but firm smile. She said, "Miss Daisy, I understand that your heart continues to wander toward Mr. Lou's face." She paused. Then her expression turned dark and terrifying as she fired off a rapid barrage of questions. "But have you cleaned the entrance, washed the blankets, checked the windowsills, swept the hallway, wiped the windows, and replaced the light bulbs?" A massive exclamation mark appeared behind Daisy as the realization hit her. She had not done a single thing. The head maid snapped, "Now, hurry along to work. Otherwise, there is no dinner today." Daisy stood in the garden, mentally exhausted. She muttered to herself, "As I thought, she's the coldest woman in midwintry." Just then, Lou leaned in again, his expression smooth and unreadable. He asked, "Miss Daisy, did you give the flower a name?" Daisy scoffed and replied, "Why would I?" Lou raised an eyebrow. He asked, "Do you even know what species you planted?" Daisy shrugged and said, "Does it matter?" Lou sighed and explained, "How do you expect to make a flower bloom like this? It will likely die before it even sprouts." He then added, "Plants grow as much as the affection you pour into them, so please ensure you give it a name." Daisy stared at him, her face completely flat. She muttered under her breath, "Well, if you do not wish to, then don't." She trailed off, her gaze dropping to the pot. She repeated the word to herself, a name. She thought about it, her eyes narrowing. She looked at the bare soil, then at a window, then at a shadowy memory of a sword. She sighed and said, "A name, huh?" She let out another sigh and decided to table it for now. She thought to herself, "I should throw these guys out and think about it later." Lying unconscious on the floor behind her was the silver-haired assassin, groaning. A flashback cut in to a few minutes earlier. 2 hooded assassins had cornered Daisy in the hallway. One of them barked, "Maid, from now on, you will follow our ord." He didn't even finish his sentence. Daisy threw a punch straight into his jaw. A huge one-hit text appeared on screen. The man crashed back with a nug. Daisy spun and drove an elbow into the second attacker's face. A 2-hit text appeared. Both assassins crumpled to the floor. Daisy dusted off her hands and looked down at them. She noted dryly that they had sent more assassins. And 2 this time. She stared at their unconscious bodies and shrugged. She decided she should toss them to the guy next door to use as laborers. Without another word, she dragged both unconscious men over to the window, hoisted them up, and casually tossed them out into the open air. Later, Daisy knelt on the floor of the manor, catching her breath. The head maid walked in, holding a cigarette between her fingers. She took a slow drag, then looked down at Daisy. She asked, "What on earth happened here, Miss Daisy?" Daisy immediately started sweating. She thought to herself that this woman was the coldest woman in midwintery. The head maid leaned in and asked, "Who are they?" Daisy stammered, "SP spies." The head maid paused, then pressed, "Did you take care of them yourself?" Daisy nervously replied, "Rats." The head maid cut her off and asked bluntly, "Did you kill them?" Daisy just stared at her, completely silent. The head maid took another puff of her cigarette, her expression unreadable. Daisy was sweating profusely, thinking to herself that she was even scarier when she was quiet. Besides that, she hadn't looked surprised at all to see assassins. Daisy silently thought that it must be a habit of hers to be the head maid. The head maid finally turned and said, "Follow me for a moment, Miss Daisy." Daisy's heart dropped. She thought to herself, "Am I getting fired?" Just when I had finally gotten used to the maid work. She followed nervously, her head lowered. The head maid stopped at a closed door and called her name again. She turned and looked at Daisy, her expression surprisingly soft. She said, "To me, you are a very significant person. You are the first person to endure more than a week at the Weatherwoods Manor." Daisy's eyes widened in surprise. The head maid smiled and continued, "As a token of my appreciation." She then opened the door slightly and asked, "Would you like to meet the master, Ms. Daisy?" She gave a gentle smile and added, "Of course, the choice is yo." Daisy didn't let her finish. Her eyes lit up and she cut in immediately, "I will." The head maid blinked. She told Daisy to answer politely. Daisy corrected herself, forcing a polite smile, and said, "I would certainly love to see him." The head maid nodded and corrected her again, saying, "You should say, I shall meet him." Daisy's smile twitched, sweat dripping down her face as she sighed inside. But in her mind, she was already celebrating. A flowchart appeared in her thoughts. Meet Viscount Weatherwoods, become closer to the Weatherwoods family, and be appointed as a permanent maid. And if she was a permanent maid, she wouldn't get fired. Even if she beat up spies, she wouldn't get fired. She looked at the head maid with determined eyes and declared, "I will definitely see him."